All righty. Welcome, everyone. As people are getting themselves connected to the, we've got chat turned off. So maybe just to let Tyler and Lizzie know, if you want to come off your microphone, open up your microphones and say hi if you are friends of Tyler and Lizzie or Zoe, and let them know that you're here. You don't have to do that, but I see no one is, everyone's being shy. Okay. We
I'll say,
are,
I'll
oh, go
say
ahead.
hello.
Okay,
I'll
go
say
ahead.
I'll say hello. My name's Carrie Cook. I'm in Knoxville, Tennessee, and I recently got into audio describing for live theater.
Great. Welcome, Carrie. Anyone else want to identify who they are and say hello?
Hi, this is Stephanie Miracle, and I'm coming in from Iowa City, Iowa. And I've been working with students to use audio description for dance.
Great. Today we're going to be talking about music and audio description. So that'll, and so I think that's a great addition for dance, because dance usually has music attached to it.
Yeah, I'd like to say hi too. Since you mentioned music, my name is Leslie Knowlton, and I'm from a little outside Philadelphia. And I'm currently both writing and narrating audio description for film and TV. But my background is I was an opera singer for 20 years. And so I am actually hoping to launch on my own, kind of pitching myself to opera companies and music productions and stage, to be able to offer audio description services for recorded media. Like I know that there are a host of places that, have recorded their performances. So rather than live audio describe, if they have archives of staged performances, I would like to be able to maybe start some sort of initiative for that.
Sounds great. Thank you, Leslie.
Yeah.
Anyone else want to say hi to Tyler and Lizzie before we get started, and Zoe? Well, let's go ahead and get started, because we've got a full agenda for you. Very exciting about today's performance. Today's this conversation. It's not a performance, it's a conversation. I'm Celia Hughes. I'm the director of Arts Park, Texas, and we have been hosting these conversations on audio description for a year now. So I think this is our fifth conversation. We started out talking specifically about audio description and dance. And as we have gone on this journey, we've discovered all kinds of interesting things that are happening around the country in terms of different ways that people are doing audio description, and most importantly, different ways that people are really trying to center their work around blind patrons and blind artists. And so today, we are going to be talking with Elizabeth Dunn. She goes by Lizzie, and Tyler Zanke. But I think I killed that, Tyler, and you're muted. So if you want to correct the pronunciation of your
It's
name,
it's really close. You put a little accent on it, but yeah, it is Zanky.
Zanke. Okay, it's got that Yankee. It's got
Yeah,
that Yankee drawl. Okay.
yeah.
And then Zoe Pantalleri, who was the describer on this project. So very excited about the conversation we're going to have today. I was introduced to these folks through Jill Venn and Lawrence Carter Long at DisArts. This is a project that they did in 2018 that we'll be talking about. I want you to know that our chat has been turned off, so there is no chatting, because that's very disruptive to people who are using screen readers. But we ask you to turn your microphones off, but we will be asking you to turn them back on. We have two different pieces, art pieces that they have worked together to create a soundscape for. And we will be having a group discussion where you'll be able to talk to Tyler and Zoe and Elizabeth after each piece. So with that being said, we're also recording this. So if you are not cool with that, turn your cameras off. But I will be spotlighting our speakers today. So let me just go ahead and do that. So that we can, there's Tyler. And there's Elizabeth. And there's Zoe. All righty. So let's get started. And let's have you all each introduce yourselves and tell us a little bit about yourselves. And why don't we start with you, Lizzie? Why don't you tell us a little bit about you and yourself as a musician?
Yes, I have been a musician for most of my life. I am classically trained in Suzuki piano. And at a very early age, I started composing music inspired by events in my life. And I was influenced by a lot of different things and different genres and artists. And I have been inspired to incorporate different sounds into my music, like ambient sounds. And I've done a lot of electronic things with my various keyboards and recording equipment and things like that. And I also have a twin brother who's also blind, and he and I had a little Celtic music duo that performed around Grand Rapids for Celtic festivals and charity events. So I really loved doing that as well. And I've also been, my music's been featured on some local videos, and so that's basically who I am as a musician.
That's great. And so we'll learn a little bit about your inspiration behind this project when we delve into the project. But that's terrific. And so do you do keyboard, or do you work with electronic music, or what is how do you work with, what is your instrument?
I'd say my main instrument is piano and keyboards. I like finding different sounds on the keyboards and just playing with them. And I also have recording equipment as well, so I can record one track and then layer things over it.
Well, that's great. Thank you. So Tyler, why don't you introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about you as a musician?
So I have a similar story. I've been into music all my life. I have a little bit of Suzuki piano classical training as well. And then I continued my piano training in college.
So would you say that piano is your instrument, or what is your instrument now?
I would say mostly, like I would say I'm mostly a singer, but I also enjoy doing piano and electronic keyboards.
Do you write your own music, your own songs?
Yes, I am a composer, a songwriter. I've worked with professional Nashville songwriters like Eric Zanitas and Jim Cristaldi.
And you and Lizzie met when you were in school, is that correct?
Yep, when we were about 6.
Oh, okay. So that's been a great long friendship. That's great.
Yes, yeah.
So
Um,
we'll hear more about the project, but do you have, when you compose, are you composing on a computer or are you composing on the piano? How
um,
does that work?
I've done both before. Composing on a computer can be great for the blind because some music tasks require that music be written visually as sheet music. So composing on a computer can really help a blind person do that visual writing.
Great.
But I spend a lot more time just recording myself on the piano or on the keyboard. I'm an audio mix artist. We had a sound collage project for quite a few years.
Great.
Um um
Great.
and and I've had several podcast episodes about me, several YouTube videos that featured my work,
So
and I'm quite proud of that.
you should be. And we've got a emerging celebrity in our midst, actually all three of you. So So Zoe, why don't you tell us a little bit about your who you are and what you do and how you arrived at this as being an accidental audio describer. I love that.
So in my professional life, I am a software engineer. I work for a global cybersecurity company, and I write like sales and inventory management programs. And the way that I got involved in this is at one point I was wondering about some accessibility technology, and I was just Googling around about it, just out of idle curiosity. And I found that like the next week, DisArt um, was going to be holding an event because they had like a news article about that technology, and then that led me to other information about them. I just thought, oh, well, it's only a few days away. I may as well just go. Uh, and then from there, I met with Jill Vinn and I started working with them. And then eventually she suggested that I work on this project, and I just said, okay.
So we've mentioned DisArt a little bit, and unfortunately Jill couldn't join the call. But can we talk? Can you talk a little bit about your understanding of what DisArt is, or what you learned when you first started working with them about what they do? And they're in Grand Rapids, Michigan. That's correct. Do you feel comfortable talking a little bit about what you were doing with them and what they do?
More or less, DisArt, my understanding is they work to advance disabled voices in and through art. And I always occupied kind of peripheral roles in DisArt, like just doing like a small part of a really big project. So I don't know if I can speak to the greater motivations or mission, but that's what I did.
And this particular project had you it was more than just a small part on this particular project. You had a pretty significant role in this project. So Lizzie, my understanding is that the 2018 exhibit, which was called Process and Presence, a contemporary disability sculpture, it was your idea to create these soundscapes for them. Am I correct in that? Or talk to me a little bit about what your idea was around this particular exhibit.
Yes, well, I got introduced to DisArt through one of our friends, and I had noticed that they didn't really represent blind people in many of their exhibits or shows, either in showcasing the artistic talents of blind people or making it accessible fully to them. And so I thought I'd like to do either one or the other of those, and ideally both. And I've also had this idea of creating music based on if someone described a piece of visual art to me, because I thought, well, how can blind people really experience that? And since I thought of music as sort of an equivalent of visual art, I thought, how could descriptions or interpretations of visual art told to a blind person transform into a musical soundscape. So that was my idea. So I wanted to really combine all of those things as a means of not only showcasing my artistic talents and doing something I wanted to do in my music, but also advocating for the accessibility and presence of these exhibits and shows in our community.
So that's terrific. So did you take this idea to Jill to DisArt? How did you bring this idea to fruition?
Yes, I talked with Jill about it, and that was in June of 2019 or 2018. And ideally, since I knew that they were going to be exhibited at Meyer Gardens later that year, which is a big botanical garden and museum and concert venue in Grand Rapids, ideally, I would have wanted to have each musical piece accompany the exhibit in real time, because I had been somewhere like the Musical Instrument Museum, which has video loops alongside the actual exhibits, and you can listen to the audio from those video loops with special headphones. And so that was one of my ideas, but I thought that might be a little bit too far-fetched for just a few months. And so I had to sort of narrow it down. But I also knew that online that would be a great medium for sharing these things. So I thought I could create these musical pieces and we could put them along with the visual representations of them online so that even someone who wasn't there for the exhibit could still take part in it. And I thought that was, looking back on it now, I feel like that was maybe a little bit more inclusive.
And a little bit ahead of its time, because that was before the whole world went online and everything was, if you were, because you did this in 2018. So that was,
We'll give them that the world went online in 2006. Clarify what?
well, yeah, but the whole world got, every programming and
Okay.
everything went on, went
Yeah.
really online.
Yeah.
And people really began to pay attention to inclusivity and being more accessible. So Tyler, so Lizzie, you went to Jill and you had heard that this exhibit was coming up, and you said, I'd like you to think about including this aspect of the exhibition, is in terms of adding music and
Yeah.
but what the final product is actually music and description. So Zoe, when were you brought into this project? How were you brought into this project?
I guess more or less I was just introduced to the idea of the project and asked if I wanted to help with it before like writing the music started. I think it was like after all of the pieces of art had been decided and sort of the lineup was created.
And then the pieces that were going to be online were selected because Zoe, how did you learn about the work? How did you learn about the artwork?
At first, I was just given sort of details like when it was made, who made it. For most of the pieces, I was given the dimensions at first, and then photos of varying quality, and then I like went back and forth asking for more basic information about them, and if they had photos of other angles, and whether the artist could comment on sort of their interpretation of certain aspects of it.
Okay. And so this was just for the pieces that were going to be online. This was not something that was going to be the in-person, the actual in-person exhibition, just to clarify.
Yeah.
And so Lizzie, when you began, and Tyler, when you guys began to create your music, were you given the audio description? Were you given Zoe's information, or how did you gain access to the sculptures? Maybe
It was mostly it was mostly text copies of. I'll have to look back. I have a lot of emails saved all the way back to many years. I don't know if the text is exactly what the audio says, but yeah, we were given some text, like written descriptions. Maybe those were from Zoe, the written descriptions. I don't remember, but yeah, those written descriptions are what inspired the music.
And is the same for you, Lizzie?
Yes.
So I'm wondering, were you given multiple texts, or were you just given one text that told the dimensions and the sculpture, who the sculpture is, and then a little bit of the description of the piece?
Just one piece of text for each sculpture. I remember the text that I was given for the Hideaki one, which we're going to listen to in a little bit. I remember it was a little bit more basic than the description. And so I based my interpretation on just that initial text, and I think the final descriptions may have been a little bit different.
So what were some of the challenges to this project? Tyler, can you talk about what were some of the challenges that you faced with this project?
To me, some of the challenges were, well, there weren't really many challenges, but I would say the closest to a challenge would be trying to read the description and try to figure out how exactly is this going to turn into music. And
Because you weren't putting the text to music, right? Let's clarify that. You weren't like
No.
creating a, yeah.
Right,
Yeah.
it was more like spiritual, like what a movie composer has to do. It's like, oh, here's this battle scene with Darth Vader in Star Wars. What kind of music is this gonna be? And you take what's going on in the movie and turn it into music. It's like that.
Okay. And would you agree with that, Lizzie? Is that how you approached it?
Yeah, that is how I approached it. And also I took little details about like we also did research about the artists themselves as well, like where they were from, what their background was, and we were also influenced by those kinds of things as well. So for example, like the culture of where the artist was from, along with certain aspects of the piece, like what it was made out of and what it represented,
Oh
and
yeah,
what
I know.
sort of texture it would have, things like that.
Great.
Oh yeah, I noticed that in your music. While I specifically said this is about the art. Like maybe I don't know why, but I decided to focus on I was putting music to the piece, not the artist. But I did notice that about your pieces.
Yeah, I was trying to do both of those. Put the music, like represent the piece and the artist in the music as well.
And so Zoe, what was the challenge for you in this project?
I think that the biggest challenge is basically the more you look at anything, the more details you're going to find and the more things that you could put into an audio description. So it was kind of looking at the piece of art as a whole and trying to decide what would people actually want to be taking away from this, or what would be most distinctive to the average person looking at this?
That's, yeah, and that is the bane of the describer, is making those choices of what, and putting the priority as to what is most important. You want to, if you're me, you want to give every little detail, but you know that would drive most people crazy. So you know, it's
Yeah.
how to prioritize and pick those really particular aspects of the painting or the sculpture that you're describing. And
Yeah,
Lizzie,
there's a lot of, like, especially with these more abstract works, there's a lot of things that, like, it's tough to place, like, which things, like, in contrast to like their distinctiveness visually, which things would have actually had significance to the artist, like why they put this little divot here or something like that. Like,
Mhm.
so picking all of that out was probably the biggest challenge.
And one of the things that I don't know if I made clear at the beginning is that this was a contemporary disability sculpture. So all of the artists had disabilities, have disabilities. And so there was that aspect of it as well. So what were the successes? What are the takeaways from this project that you consider a success? Lizzie, can you talk to that?
Yeah, I really enjoyed doing this project. As I said before, I really wanted to do something where I was turning visual art into music and also advocating for disabilities at the same time. Um, and I also enjoyed just getting my music out there and having it be listened to alongside these art pieces. So I would say that it was a really great experience for me. And I'm really grateful that I took the initiative to make it happen.
Thank you. And how about you, Tyler? What do you consider to be a big success of the project?
I'm just glad that was able to get my music out there, that I was able to advocate for accessibility, getting blind people involved in the art world. At the time, a couple of years before, we had started a sound collage project called Mini Nifty, and imagine like a blind version of I don't know you guys in the art world. There were some experimental sound collage collectives like Negative Land, where they were kind of a band, but at the same time, sometimes you'd get these three members or these two members or these four members. Like they weren't always touring all at once, so they were more of a collective rather than a band, and they did art, not just music. And we were always inspired by collectives like that. And therefore, when Lizzie was telling me about her work with DisArt, I was like, oh, it's about art and it's about so it's like the sound like the collage collectives and it's about disabilities, which is something we've been like accessibility, which is something we've been advocating for all our lives. So I was like, this is gonna be amazing if we work on a project like this together. And I just think it was fantastic how we put together the music, like um and like Lizzie was saying about the musical instrument museum thing, where how interesting it would be if there were in-person loops. That would have been like that would have right there would have been something that Negative Land would do, like create this interactive exhibit with changing audio. And I was a little bit disappointed that it didn't end up becoming that. But like Lizzie was saying, like because it was online, in a way that actually got more people to view it.
Right. And so that's kind of like a call to action to all people out there that are doing exhibits to start to think about to loop in and do some continuous looping of their exhibits. Zoe, what would you consider to be a success?
I guess I liked the impressions that I got of some of the descriptions that I wrote.
Yeah, and would there have been something that you wish you knew about description before you started this project? What is something that would have been really helpful?
Yeah, so I guess throughout my life, I haven't had a lot of exposure to audio descriptions as a sighted person. Like I know what goes into like a movie or a book or like a song or something like that, but I just don't have that baseline of context for what audio description is expected to be or should be. So working that out at the start of this project was, I guess, a big hurdle to get over. So I guess I just wish I had more of that sort of baseline of knowledge.
Well, we're glad that you did it. I think that I think at the time, and maybe still currently, there aren't any describers in the Grand Rapids area. So yeah, so we're delighted that you took the initiative, stepped up, did the research, and worked with Lizzie and Tyler and Jill on this project. So let's go ahead, and we've got a video of two of the pieces. And so we're going to listen to the first one, which is a Salamander by Petra Cuppers. April is going to share screen. Should I just unspotlight our three speakers? Is that probably the best thing to do? Probably. Yeah, I'm going to remove the spotlight. So where is... How come I can't find Tyler? Alrighty. Interesting. There we are. Remove spotlight. And Zoe. All right, April, if you want to go ahead and share screen.
Okay, let me get that going here.
And basically, once we listen to it, we're gonna have Tyler and Zoe talk about this a little bit, but we'll if you have a question, please unmute yourself and join the conversation.
Salamander by the Olympias Project by Petra Cuppers, 2014. Digital underwater photography, displayed on a 42-inch monitor. Each of the digital photographs taken by Petra Cuppers show disabled people underwater. The shots are in color and fill the entirety of a 42-inch television monitor. The bodies pictured in these photographs are in motion, which means that there are occasions when objects are not fully in focus. All of the subjects of these photographs have a look of contentment, joy, and freedom. The clothing and hair of the subjects move independently from the bodies themselves, and the presence of bubbles and other moving water around the subjects indicate motion and fluidity.
Should I
Oh.
share the second one?
No, we're going to talk about this one
Okay.
first. So Tyler, this is your music. Do you want to talk a little bit about the music? And people, if you want to unmute yourself and ask a question, please turn your camera on, and that way I'll know you want to ask a question.
To me, this piece of music, I think, and I've had a 20-year music career, I think this particular piece of music is one of the best that I have done so far. when I was reading the description and it was talking about the angles and people underwater, um, to me that was a thing of pure beauty. Like I have written many stories, have had many dreams, both really amazing ones and really scary ones that took place underwater. And so for me, receiving a description of all these people in different poses and underwater, to me that was just a beautiful thing to read. And therefore, I pictured myself, like, what would it feel like if I was one of those people underwater, and what music would be going through my head when I was enjoying these couple of seconds underwater. And I suddenly noticed that the music just kept flowing out of my fingertips. And like to me, the underwater scenery is one of the most beautiful things that you can imagine. And therefore, like the harp being the flowing water and the flute being the scenery just started flowing out of me.
Great, thank you. And Zoe, how did you when you look and the description is referring to several photographs. So and so those, I think we showed two of the photographs. Were those the two that were in the exhibition?
I believe that there was quite a larger collection that was shown in a
Okay.
rotation.
In rotation. Okay. So do you have any thoughts on how, when you were given these photographs and said make descriptions, how you thought, oh dear, how am I going to do this?
Yeah, so it started with kind of wondering, like, how am I going to get all of the details of all of these? Like, everybody's wearing different, like, sort of street clothes underwater. So, like, how am I going to work in all of the details of this, and how am I going to, like, describe how, like, the position that this person is in, or this person? But then I just thought, well, it'd probably be better for this case to just distill it down to what's common to the photos, and sort of the things that are slightly different to just allude to that instead of outright state this person's in this position, this person's in this position.
Yeah, I thought that I noticed that as a description. Does anyone, I see Terry, you're unmuted. Did you have a question? You don't have to, but did anybody want to comment or have a question about anything? Okay. Yeah, so I particularly felt Tyler, with your music, and I really liked the choice that Disart made to introduce with just the music, then add the description, and then end with music, because I really felt like I was in the water. I was floating. It was so peaceful. It was, it just a really a lovely experience, and I think that that choice was good. And again, I appreciated your sensitivity to the music, Tyler, and I loved the way you talked about how you feel about water, even though you've had nightmares in water, which that's another whole conversation. But yeah, I think beautiful, beautiful. So April, let's go ahead and get the next one ready. I'm going to take the Tyler, I'm going to unspotlight him, and I'm going to unspotlight Zoe. And so this piece is Eye, Nose, Mouth by Hideaki Yoshikawa.
Eye, Nose, Mouth by Hideaki Yoshikawa, 2017, Clay. There are 3 objects with dimensions in inches in order of height, width, and depth: 14.6 inches by 3.1 inches by 3.1 inches. The works are comprised of 3 elongated conical shapes set upright. These objects are made of clay and fired to a gray-blue with light brown along the back. Although the shapes are unevenly made, they generally are wider at the bottom than they are at the top. Starting at various points about a third of the way up each of the works is a rough textured area. This area appears formed by notching small divots in horizontal lines across the work's surfaces. The area wraps almost all the way around each work, but leaves an uneven, smooth gap on one side extending all the way to its top.
Great. Thank you so much. So, Zoe, Lizzie, this was your piece. So, do you want to talk about this piece and the way that you worked on it, the process that you took?
Yes. So I actually created, this was part of a longer recording that was used for 3 different well, I think I initially made each recording for each of the 3 different similar pieces. And so I thought that each one would be described individually using I had different iterations of the theme using different sounds that come in and out of the full recording, which you didn't hear. But this first one was used, and I felt like it was still a great representation of the piece itself, because you could hear those lower notes sort of representing the rough surfaces. And so I thought that it has rough surfaces. What would it sound like if someone's finger went across them or something? And then the higher notes sort of represented not only the material, because like you think of clay as sort of smooth, and that reminds me sort of more like bell type sounds, but I was also inspired by the culture from which the artist came. So the Japanese or Asian culture in general. So the musical chords and the melodies that I used were based on that as well.
Yeah, it was very evident with the music that you had a definite Japanese influence there, and I'm sorry that I butchered Hideaki.
Hideaki.
I've got it phonetically spelled and I still can't get it. Hideaki.
Yeah. And I think one of the challenges of composing these pieces was I wanted to describe the art while not giving away that, like, I didn't want the music to be too evoking too much of a certain emotion or represent something stereotypically. So I think that was a challenge, but I feel like I approached it very carefully, and I feel like this is one of the results of that. So it balances all my ideas without being too emotionally driven or stereotypical.
Yes, nice. And so Zoe, these were 3 similar but different pieces that, when I look at them, I'm like, I don't have any idea why these 3 little pointed cones are called eye, nose, mouth. So how did you approach the description that you arrived at for this particular piece?
This is one of the ones that was more challenging because of sort of the lack of detail in the initial photos that I got. Like I had to ask for more photos and like do research online to look at this artist's other works to figure out how exactly they produced these. So like at a glance, like especially if you're looking at like a low resolution photo, it just looks like a cone made of clay and part of it's kind of rough. But you have to have like a really close up photo or a really high resolution to be able to see like the way that the rough texture is made with like thousands and thousands of tiny dots. So
Yeah, and and again, we're just wondering the relationship of the piece to the visual artist. I struggle as a describer. I struggle with abstract art, and to me, this was abstract. Tyler's piece was not abstract. That was much more realistic. People swimming underwater in their clothing. But here it's much more abstract. It's the interpretation, the what the meaning is really in the eye of the person who's looking at it. And so you as the describer have to try to figure out how to present this so that there can come some meaning from the piece.
yeah, that's another big aspect that was a difficulty in a lot of these pieces because of like the abstract nature of them. I look at it and I immediately, for a lot of them, I describe my own meaning to it and my idea of why the artist chose to make it a certain way. But whether or not that's accurate to the artist's own intentions, that's not the meaning that everyone's going to get out of it just looking at it. So it's really hard to avoid sort of giving my own impression on something that may not even be intended to have one meaning.
You're absolutely right, and that is the struggle of the describer, because we all bring to description our own experiences and our own information. And even though we're to put all of that aside and say what it is that we're seeing, sometimes when you're dealing with something that doesn't have an apparent meaning, you do tend to just go, okay, this is what I'm seeing. This is what I'm looking at, and then you can apply to it whatever meaning is appropriate for you. And that's where I love again the notion of and the choice that Dissart made to bring the music in and not have the description fill the entire piece. That the description, that the music is more prominent in some ways than the description is, which was what Lizzie's idea was. And to begin with, right, Lizzie, was that music is enhancing the appreciation of this visual artwork.
Yes, of course.
So I'm wondering, so thinking moving forward, and I'm going to bring Tyler back in. This was a great project. I really am so happy that I learned about it, that I've had an opportunity to talk with the three of you and to share a little bit of the work that you all did. It was back in 2018, so I'm not sure it's really available anywhere. You can find information about it, but not really the exhibit. So what would you like to see other organizations out there to bring visual art to life for people who are blind in particular? Tyler, you talked a little bit about how, about having, and both of you actually talked about having some kind of a recording at museums or at exhibits where people could do a QR code and play the recording. Is that am I correct? Is that what is that what I'm thinking? Okay.
Similar, yeah.
So what?
Yeah, QR codes aren't the most accessible.
Okay.
Exactly.
Okay. And explain why they're not accessible. Because you
Um,
don't know where to point your phone and
Right, right.
Yeah.
that stuff. Yeah. So how would we make that accessible then? What
Um,
would we do?
I'm guessing um that given what they did at the Musical Instrument Museum, maybe there would be one of those headphones with a wireless device where it's like, oh, you're walking past the underwater photos. Cue this piece of music and this description, and it
Yeah.
would automatically play.
Yeah.
So I don't know. So maybe it would. Maybe that device would use QR codes, but it would be like automatic.
Okay.
Like
Yeah.
I don't know how the museum does it, like the Musical Instrument
Right.
Museum.
Right. So are either of you or all three of you working on projects right now that are similar to this or doing anything? Or do you have interest, or are you talking with anyone about doing something that's similar to this?
I personally am not doing anything that's similar right now, but I would like to continue doing this. Not necessarily as a full career, but maybe as a side project, definitely.
And I know, Tyler, you're working a lot with music, so I know you're continuing to move forward. Are you doing anything similar to this right now?
Not as far as not as far as like accessibility per se, but I am working on several projects. Um, I'm doing one project researching what impact artificial intelligence will have on music. I I'm working on I'm actually going to attempt to apply for the big award show, the AI Song Contest.
Okay.
I'm going to see if I can apply for that. It's going to require a lot of essays. This is going to be like an epic scholarship where you have to have all these essays and your motivation and your thought process and stuff. It's a big deal. It's not just you post your song. It's a big deal. It's like you're applying for a scholarship.
Well, we send good positive energy your way, Tyler. And Zoe, any more description in your future? Have you introduced description to your software and cybersecurity? That would be kind of interesting.
No projects at the moment.
Yeah.
Well, by the way, by the way, real software engineer inside joke. You know what's kind of like descriptions? Comments. Make sure to put lots of comments in your code.
There you go. So we have a few minutes left. If anybody would like to go ahead and unmute themselves and talk to Zoe or Tyler or Lizzie, please feel free to do that. I'm gonna unspotlight them so that we can bring everybody on camera. So does anyone have a comment or a question for the project, or would like to have ask a question that I didn't ask? And don't be shy.
I guess I do. This is Leslie. First of all, just beautiful work to all three of you. And maybe this is more of a comment than a question, but I'm just intrigued, having seen how this all came together in your final project, how like the language of words and the language of music can work so beautifully together. And I just to kind of second the comments that you were making, Celia and Lizzie, about how you know the constant striking the balance between being descriptive, which is what the audience needs, but not interpreting, but finding enough color and evocative words and music in there to give the flavor of what it is you're describing, but without overtly interpreting. And just the many ways that the music you choose to write can influence and enhance that. I think it's just just a really beautiful thing to ponder, and how if you'd had a different soundscape in your mind, how that would have perhaps changed the interpretation of the piece. So anyway, thank you all for your really beautiful work. I really enjoyed seeing that, hearing it, and knowing that you're doing it.
Thank
Oh,
you, Leslie.
Thank you, Leslie.
You're welcome.
Thank you. Amazing.
Would anyone else like to say anything? Ask a question? Okie dokie. Well, then we were going to say thank you very much to Lizzie and Tyler and Zoe. Tyler, do you have a website or somewhere that people can go and learn more about your work?
Um, yeah, I actually right now, just because of how accessible different software is, right now I would have everyone pile onto Facebook, facebook.com/Tyler Zanke.
Okay, and
I
that's
yeah, I do have a website, but I just think Facebook is easier to handle, especially for the general public in this decade. It's like
so
and
that's Tyler Zanke, ZAHNKE on Facebook.
yep.
And Lizzie, do you have a social media presence that you'd like people to check into? I know that you're pursuing other interests right now, but I wonder if there's some place that you want to direct people to.
Yeah, I eventually would like to revive my YouTube channel. There's currently nothing on it right now. But there are other things on YouTube that I've participated in or on other websites as well. So I don't really have much of a social media presence right now.
Well, that's
But
okay.
I
So,
think it's okay too.
right, exactly. And do you go by Elizabeth or by Lizzie if people were going to look for you on social media?
It's interchangeable. On Facebook, I'm Elizabeth Dunn.
Okay, great. So if people want to, they can follow her on Facebook. And Zoe, any more accidental descriptions and work for you in the future, or was this your 15 minutes of fame?
I think I'd like to work on something like this in the future.
Great, excellent, excellent. And so I don't know if you have a social media presence or you're working in the background in cybersecurity. So if anybody has a question about cybersecurity, like why was my bank account hacked, talk to Zoe.
Oh yeah.
Well, thank you everyone for coming. This is a great conversation. I'm very inspired by what you're doing. I'm going to run off and try to look for a project like this too. I think it's great. And
Yeah.
stay tuned. We'll be doing another one of these conversations in August. And thank you, Lizzie, Tyler, and Zoe for spending the last hour with us. We really appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you.
Okay. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye.